What is up, guys? This is Lintheo coming at you with a discussion today about the diversity in the meta. Now, this is kind of a response to Inch95's video. He was talking about the diversity in the meta and just his opinion on it, and I thought it's a great idea for a video. So I'm gonna kind of just do, it's kind of a response, but also something that I was kind of umming and ahhing about talking about, just because the format's going to be over in about a month, because the new ban list comes out, and it's just something that I think actually is good, warranted to be discussed about. So well, let's get into it. The meta that we are in now, some people might say that it hasn't changed much since last format, but with Just Alliance coming out, it's brought out 3 decks that are just there. They are causing problems. So we've got the Burning Abyss, Shadows, and the Stell Knights. They're the 3 big decks that came out of the Just Alliance, and a lot of people didn't actually expect Burning Abyss to do anything. Like, their rise to popularity and their rise in the tier list to tier 1, arguably, has caught everyone by surprise. Like, Dante, when it first came out, is the kind of the main bling card in the deck, because all the rest are rares. Dante was about £15 at a stretch, and now it's like £30 card. It's doubled in price because of the popularity and how people have actually realised the deck is actually quite good. The reason the deck's good is because you've got all these floaters, the searching, the tour guide really gets the deck going. You've also got access to chaos, so you've got the BLS and the Chaos Sorcerers, which are pinnacle cards. They are so overpowering and can completely change a game around. It's absolutely brutal. With Stell Knights, you've got a really consistent rank 4 toolbox deck that have some very powerful cards in there. I think that the deck itself is just really good. I'm quite a fan of it, but I'm not a fan of Denep's actual price. So I'm just going to forget about that. I was going to build them beforehand, but I wanted to pick up Yang Zings first, because I really like Yang Zings, and as we all know, any Synchro based deck I'm kind of on board for, because I really like the Synchro era. And then the big one, the absolute tits one, was Shadows, and our Shadows, because everyone is running them basically. They are the main deck, and they were the deck that was tipped to be the best of the format. Whether or not you think they are now the best of the format is another thing, but they are certainly there. They are certainly in the running for the best deck of the format, and it is certainly just an interesting deck to go against. While they are not bulletproof, they are still very strong, and their advantage that the deck can just keep going through and keep pushing is just pretty intense. Does that mean there are only 3 decks in this format? Already, you might argue that 3 decks is a lot to be in the top running. To be honest, there are not just 3 decks. You have a lot of other ones. You have Lightsworns. Lightsworns are always a problem because you never know what's going to happen with them. They can come out complete left field and absolutely mully you with some amazing mills and then JDs all over the place. You have rogue decks that are starting to come back. I've seen some Herald of Perfection tops, I've seen some Constellar tops. I've also seen, you know, some older decks that have artifacts built in. Artifacts are a very interesting one as well, because a lot of people are putting artifacts into different decks. You also have water. Mermaids are still a thing. Like, I'm so surprised they haven't been hit on the ban list yet, because I just thought that their time is up. They just need to disappear. I'm not saying they need to disappear because they're broken. I'm saying they need to disappear because it's Konami's philosophy to get rid of older decks that are still powerful and going to cause problems for new decks. Because then what's the point in trying to push a new set when you have an older deck that is like a quarter of the price, because Mermaids are stupidly cheap now. They're still shitting on the top decks. I think Mermaids are going to go to going to get hit in the next ban list. Probably Sphere and something else will go to 1, maybe TS. Not quite sure. It's only going to be interesting to see. The format is built up of many different decks. As I said earlier, you have the 3 top decks in my opinion that are up there. Then you have the tier 2 decks, which are still about 4 to 5 different decks. If you think about it, that's 8 different decks that all have the capability to really push through in big events. As I'm recording this now, we have 2 events going on. We have YCS Toronto and we have YCS Madrid. These are quite big events. I'm not sure what the turnout for Toronto is currently, but for Milan it's quite a small turnout. I think it's only about 470 to 480 players. Where if you compare to YCS London that we had, there was nearly 1,400 people, I think. Around that, it was way above 1,000. That's huge! So I'm quite surprised that that hasn't, that is not as big as it should be. But why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because it's the biggest events on the calendar before the ban list change. and the ban list change is going to bring through all of the regionals. Obviously there are regionals happening in the Americas, but for us we don't have any regionals yet. And once that new ban list comes out, once that new set comes out in November, then it's going to start getting interesting again. This format being so diverse is interesting, but I feel that it's not really that important because the way that the ban lists are and the way that everything's going to change, I think next ban list is going to be a big one. We're going to have a lot of things changing in there. I feel that the format now and the diversity is good, but I don't think it's going to make much of a difference and much of an impact on the future because there's nothing really happening. But if we talk about diversity in the game itself, I am all for diversity because it makes it interesting. If we look at the Dragon Ruler format, we basically had two decks. We had Dragon Rulers and we had Prophecy. Prophecy, when they had Judgment at 3, was brutal. And so were Dragon Rulers when they had their babies, and even when they didn't have their babies, they were still amazing. That format for me was quite a boring format because every time I went to a tournament, it was Dragon Ruler, Spellbook, Dragon Ruler, Spellbook. And you might think that you can be salty. You might say, well, you're just being salty because you went up against decks that were better than you. It's not that. I'm completely fine to be beaten by a better deck. I'm fine to be beaten by a better player. But when I see the same thing over and over and over again, it really makes me just bored, and I just can't be bothered playing it, because especially Spellbooks, when you were sat there for about 5 minutes just watching them play with themselves, you were just disheartened. I was disheartened because I was bored of it. I made sure to side in draw Lockbirds just so I could be like, I can save myself the boredom. Non-diverse formats make the game, for me, boring. However, there is also a flip side to that. If there is a tier 0 format where there is just 1 or 2 decks that are absolutely amazing and shit over everything, you can argue that that's quite interesting as well. But for me, I don't mind playing in either or, but I would much rather play in a more diverse format because it just makes it more interesting. A lot of people argue that if you go into a big tournament, very diverse tournament and format, that means that you're going to have to try and side deck for about 5 to 10 decks that you're going to be going up against. And people say that's too difficult, it's unfair because you can't really side against other decks that are going to come out of left wing and absolutely muller you. I don't really like that excuse because I feel that if a deck is not on your radar and you're not siding for it, then technically it shouldn't be a problem. There are two options. If you didn't remember the deck was a thing, or you don't think that deck is an issue, that's down to you as a player to side against that deck. And while it might be difficult because we only have 15 cards, it's all about choice. You need to look at your deck, you need to look at your side deck and the possible options that you're going to be going up against and actually really figure out the weakness of your deck, what can really go against it, and what decks you can actually be like, you know what, I don't need to side against that deck because I feel I have a good matchup against it. This is where generic cards come in, generic side deck cards that can hit multiple decks. You've got your Lion Prisoner Mirrors and your Shadow Prisoner Mirrors are two of the most generic side deck cards, and for this format, they're great. Shadow Prisoner Mirror hits Burning Abyss and it hits Shadows, with a number of other things. Lion Prisoner Mirror hits Talonites, Constellas, Judgment Dragon, and Light Swans, and everything. It's all about how to build a proper side deck. Again, you can argue saying, it's unfair for me to think of every single deck that's out there in the meta and then side for it. But that's just how it is. It's a game and it's all about skill and preparing yourself for the game. Because at the end of the day, if you are ill prepared for a tournament, you're probably not going to do well. So I want to know what you guys think about diversity in formats, and if you prefer a diverse format or you prefer more one that's geared to, you know, more of a tier 0 format. So as I said, let me know down in the comment section below. Like, comment, subscribe, and I shall catch you guys later.